Hey everybody, it's Pastor Hugo. Thanks for tuning in to this week's video. This is the last of our chosen videos. In June, we're going to be starting a new series going through the book of Mark. I'll tell you more about that in the video next week. But for today, we're in Acts chapter 9, the conversion of Paul or Saul. And let me start with a question. Who is the person that you know? Somebody you know personally who you think is the least likely person to become a Christian. Or maybe I could put it another way. Who is the person that you know who is the farthest from the kingdom of God? Try to get that person in your head right now. You might want to do 2 or 3 of those people. And now let me introduce you to Saul or Paul. Saul would have been his Hebrew name. Paul was his Greek name. Like most people of his day, he had 2 names, like Simon was also Peter. Matthew was also Levi, a Greek name and a Hebrew name. That was the case with Paul or Saul. Acts 7, they cast him out of the city and stoned him, Stephen. And the witnesses laid down their garments at the feet of a young man named Saul. It's the first time we ever see him. And then Acts 8, the chapter just previous to the one we're in. Saul approved of his execution. And then a few verses later, Saul was ravaging the church and entering house after house. He dragged off men and women and committed them to prison. And then as we start Acts chapter 9, but Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest, a guy who's pretty far from the kingdom of God. It's no wonder that we hear Paul call himself chief of sinners. He was bent on destroying God's church. And yet all it took was one appearance from Jesus and one question: Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And it opened Saul, it blinded him physically, but it also opened his eyes to who Jesus was and just how real Jesus was. And I think that the big lesson for us in this is no one is so far from the kingdom of God that Jesus can't reach them. The chief of sinners, Saul, was one that was a life that Jesus turned around, transformed, and then used as the greatest missionary in the church. So back to that question we started with. Who's that person you think you know who's least likely to become a Christian? I want you to pick at least one, maybe 3. And here's an assignment, a challenge, opportunity for this week. Take some time every day to pray that Jesus will become real to that person that you thought of when we asked that question. That person or those 2 or 3 people who are least likely to become Christian. And pray for them. Pray that Jesus would make himself real to them. And then watch and wait and look for opportunities to love them and let me know how it goes. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.